Baruch haba, welcome everyone to our study of the Sefer, the Talmud, otherwise known as Daki Gemara. As we mentioned, the censors at one point refused to have the word Talmud, so the people changed the word to Gemara to keep the thing going. But whatever it is, we start off with just a little summarization to get us where up to date. We're holding in the first chapter of Daki Gemara, and he explains that wisdom comes from Marba B'Yeshiva, Yarba B'Yeshiva, and that means that you have to sit on a text a lot. You have to go over things many, many times. And the second thing he explains that you're going to run into obstacles, so you really have to gear yourself up to overcome them. You're going to have to exert yourself, i.e. work. And the third thing you have to do is ask Hashem to help you, because this chachma that we're learning only comes from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and therefore to really understand it, and not just to apparently understand it, really comes from only ask Hashem to help. Then he explained the basic rules of Iyun, which was Diktuk HaLashon. That's very, very important. And the Ramchal has a very short chapter on Diktuk, on Diyukim, but the Daki Gemara really holds that this is one of the main features of learning the Iyun. You have to learn how to be medactic, and he teaches us the basic rules. And remember, we spoke about Inyan and the milos. We spoke about subject matter and the words being used. Both those things cannot have any extra either words or repeated content. And the second thing that he said is that everything that we read has to be chiddush, that we wouldn't have known from whatever went before. And the third thing we have to look out for is for changes. Now, we just did a whole discussion of the Ramchal and Zman in order. When we see things out of order, that's a flag that should stop us and say, wait a minute, we have to think here. We can't just repeat what's being said here. There's something that's out of order, and therefore there's some message being broadcast to us. So order is very important, whether it's changes in the din from one case to the next, or it's inconsistencies in language, pasuk bakad singular chadis. These are all important Diktuk HaLashon that we have to key on in order to get the real message of the text we're studying. Then he explains that the people in the Gemara are all Balei Seichel. A lot of people think that the person who asked the question is the simpleton, and the person who answers is the Chacham. It doesn't work that way. It's actually just the opposite. The person who's asking the question is very, very powerful, and he's forcing the person who's going to give the teretz to be dochik in some way. But they're both Balei Seichel, and in these arguments that we see in Gemara back and forth, they're essential issues that are being debated and evaluations that are being made, and one can never underestimate even a rejected Havamina, as he points out, the Daki Gemara, that the Gemara says, Miyakora myself relay. When someone even rejects his own opinion, we ask, well, what was the basis of his Havamina? What we're doing now is studying this third point, docking Meforshim. And what I decided to do, as I did in Derek Funos, is to view the topic in its entirety. In other words, I want to jump to the section where it's a content or it's a content explained Meforshim at length. And once we get that complete picture, then I'd like to do an application going into Rashi and saying, okay, now what is Rashi doing here? Okay, Tosfos, what is he doing here? So he explained in chapter 1 the he has 5 little rules here of what proportion do. Okay, now that's these rules over here, and that's what we're going to be investigating. But before those rules, he says that it's very important to always look at the divrei maskil. Whatever those divrei maskils are, that's specifically where the Mefarish is going to comment. So he says, look at the lashon of the al-eiz lashon hakasav hu medabim. First, what are those divrei maskils? Lahaskil mahu asher hu mosif mahu lashon of the Gemara. Always look at what the text says and what the Mefarish is adding, because then you'll understand what his kavanah is by understanding the difference between what it says and what he adds. And here's a short list of kavanah. He's either metakan lashon, that means we said in our Mishnah Baba Kama, it says chav mazik, it should say chayav, or he's meforish in Inyan, which we'll get into. There's 2 types of perushin. There's perushin because there's the beginning step perushin, the beirav, and then there's the chacham perushin, which we're going to discuss in a few seconds. Or he's metaretz akush, like Tosfos Levim Gomer. If you ask me, this harsha v'yesh loma, or many safek, he'll say, wait a minute, this word is difficult to understand, and I'll explain why. Or he's nishma m'perishacher, or he's saying what he's saying because he wants you to not say an alternative. So that's his short list. He also tells you, of course, that you have to look at the girsa of the Mefarish and what's in front of us. Are they really, like we said in the Gemara, many times you'll see that what Rashi has in front of him is not the text that we have. So his commentary may be not what you expect from the text we have, because it's from text. Okay. This is a fantastic step. You always say, well, what would have been the opposite alternative to what he said? And if you do that step, then you'll figure out what he's trying to avoid saying. Okay? So that's what he says. And he says to us the proper way of study really is to look at the text itself and then go into the Mefarish and see if what he says agrees with what you say. And after you understand what he's saying, always check out this thing about what he wants to reject or what he is avoiding saying. And then finally, what's the hechlach? Since he's saying the chiddush, you would have thought something else, like we brought up. You would have thought simply by reading the pasuk that Leah was jealous of Rachel, and Rashi says no, it means not jealous of all her children, but jealous for the mitzvahs that she had done, and she must have been the greatest pekis than me, said Rachel, and that's what she was jealous about. Well, what's the hechol, Rashi? How does he know that? Okay, but first you have to know what he wants to say, and then you'll understand. Then you can try to figure out what he's trying to dochek. Again, as we said, look at the Gemara, but look at the source. Okay, and then look at the commentary. Then try to figure out the shita of Mefarish. What does he hold in general? Because that's going to after you understand his shita, how he perceives things, like why would Rashi be different than Tosfos? What's their mahalech? What's their svaras? How they conceive it? So then, after you get this full picture of Mefarish, you're supposed to put all that information back into the Gemara. Now, he says, "B'chol dibor shel Tosfos, v'chedushim asher halacha." Probably that's the Rush or the Rif. V'achar sheteda kavanah so, o safek o kusha shemonim. After you understand their problems, the Tosfos, the Rif, the Rush, then yesh l'chalad l'hayin divrei Rashi, Baros. Im yigish bo b'nishmat benu. Did Rashi have the same problem as Tosfos, and he said something different. He did not want to say what Tosfos said. Or do they both agree on this issue? Or do they have very variant explanations of the same problem? He says you have to keep track of where Rashi and Tosfos agree and where they disagree. Okay, this is big stuff because you know, we're talking about keeping a lot on your head, and that's what the Rishonim were able to do. But at least we have to be aware that that's what has to be done. And you'll see when people write Torah, they keep track, and by keeping track, and you can then see consistencies, seemingly inconsistencies, and then understand something deeper. Okay, that's his basic. That's his basic comment on the Meforshim. Okay, now I'd like to go to what we started last week. He goes into depth, and I'll just give a quick overview of that. These are things that have to be read over and over again until you get it. Basically, he has 4 points he wants to explain in chapter 12 about why does someone comment on a text? Why is it? So he identifies 4 points. When someone is trying to explain, doesn't know what sefer it is, here's why he's doing what he's doing. The first thing is because of a matchilim, you see, it's called a beirav. Beginning people don't have the ability to understand what is going on in the sefer or in this particular language that's being used. Why? Shehu sasam l'chasam. It's closed. What does it mean it's closed? There's 2 ways that we say that things are non-understandable. Either it's because there's outside information that's necessary, and you as a beginner don't know it because you haven't learned that Mishnayos over there, and you haven't learned the Gemara over there, and you haven't read the Tosfos over there. So there's outside information that you just need to know. Or it just happens to be very unusual, like the word mav that we said. It's a strange word. It doesn't exist anywhere. There's variations of the word. It's a very strange word. He says you don't have to investigate and say, well, what are the alternatives? Because he's not trying to nishma mi perishach. He's just trying to teach you what it says. So you don't say peshitim ma'kamashma because there's something. He's saying it for people who are either beginners or because the words just need explanation. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the second thing is that he has to say what he's saying in order for you not to say another interpretation. Like we said, Rashi says that the jealousy was jealousy of the good deeds of latest good deeds. Okay, so you should see mention simple jealousy. Okay. Either because it's check, or he says, or because that simple explanation is very dohek. Now, then he warns us if you want to find out what the parish he's trying to dohek, so say the opposite of the statement or the variant, and you'll find out, as we said before. Now, the third thing is that he's saying what he's saying in order to, because if you don't say what he's saying, you're going to end up with a kasha. Okay? L'shomer me et kafta u'yufta. He has to say what he's saying, because if he doesn't say what he says, then you're going to end up with terrible kasha. Okay? Either P'nei Yinyan or Imlo Yivareno. If he doesn't say what he's saying, then you're going to be stuck. So he has to say what he's saying to Taretz Kusha. okay, to protect from kasha. And if you want to know the kasha, he says, so you have to look at his words very carefully. Okay. And you always have to determine, here's a basic rules we should always think. There's two types of kashas. There's kashas on language and kashas on Indian. Is it a question of language that's difficulty, or is it a subject that's difficult? Okay. Then he says, look, if you gave a teretz to a problem, you have to see whether the teretz is a good teretz. Good. That's the third thing. The fourth thing is Latachan Lashon, and we said we brought Rashi over there. Here's the real pasuk. The pasuk says, Ki yigov shor, not yigach, ki yigov shor eshore'ehu umeis umacho es hashorachai. So it says, Ki yigov shor, I'm sorry, it says, Ki yigov shor ish es shore'ehu. It says shor ish. So Rashi says, oh, that means shor shel ish. Okay, there's no real, it's just an unusual lashon, so Rashi spells it out. Okay, why the Torah use that unusual lashon is another issue, but there Rashi is just simply attacking the lashon. Or as we said in the Mishnah, it said chav, and it really should say chayat. And that's what he says. Okay, so those are the four reasons why a commentator comments. Either because there's two levels. There's the Beirav level, that means the beginning person doesn't understand what's going on because he's missing outside information, or that it's a strange topic like Kutchim. That's number one. The more serious stuff for the Talmidei Chachamim is that he's saying what he's saying because he wants you not to say some other parish. He's fighting. Tosos is fighting Rashi, or Rashi knows what you might think and is saying what his position against that. Okay. The third thing is that he has to say what he's saying because if you don't say what he's saying, then you're going to have a kasha. Okay? And the fourth thing is simply the Latachan Lashon. Very good. Okay, then he says, of course, you have to give every word is important in the Rishonim. Okay. Now, this is where we were up to. Sorry, that was a very long introduction, but it's very important to key on the four basic points here. Now he says, every time we look at any commentator or mechaber is like the Rambam is mechaber. He puts things together. He's not specifically commenting on another text. He wrote a whole new sefer. We said as the Ramchal said, that was the first rule that he had before you know no say and nasu was darkei mafarish. Everyone has a specific manner of delivery, and you have to be sensitive to that in order to understand his message. And he's going to give us an explanation of how Rashi and the Ramban use language. And then he's going to go into the Gemara, and he's going to explain what the various derachim of the Gemara are when they use language, how it presents information. So the first thing you have to do is understand the derech of mafarish. Then you have to see in any place, once you understand what's his shita, how he operates, so then you have to see if he's being consistent here or not. And we hope he is being consistent. If not, so then he's saying there's some other factor in the case that is different than his general shita. Okay. Now, before he explains Rashi and Tosfos, he explains how language works. Kol dibur b'lashon, o yeah, lashon uchrach, o lashon mesupak, o nimna. We had this in the Mara Mugbal of the Ramchal. He breaks down language statements into three parts. They're either mukhrach, they must be saying X information. Lashon mesupach, they may be saying X information. Or nimna, they definitely are not saying Y. Okay? So statements either definitely take a position for or against, or you don't know. What does he mean by statements which are mukhrach? Shebehechrach mora al oso inyan. The language must mean X. Okay, it must mean what it says. Okay. Mesupak. What is mesupak language? Shemora al oso inyan aval lo harobadis. It does indicate certain information, but not definitely. Ki efsha shemora gam kain al dava acher v'zehu nikra lashon mishuta. The language is, we call it in English, ambivalent. It means it says what it says, but it could mean something else because the lashon is synonymous. Okay, so we gave an example. For instance, when it says that there's arba avos mazikin, the word av. So an av usually means a classical case. And from every classical case, there must be a toda. So the Gemara later on says that av can also just mean something that's written in the Torah. It's called an av. It doesn't have to have todos. So that's called lashon mishutaf. The word av can have two different definitions. It's always important to recognize what's the primary meaning and what's the secondary meaning. Sometimes they're equal, and sometimes one is more mistaber than the next. But when in language, there's sometimes language is ambivalent, and you have to be aware of that. Nimna, rotze lomar, shehu nimna laharos al oso inyan. The statement definitely is not talking about subject X, okay? So he says, always check out the language in front of you. Must it be referring to this? May it be referring to this? And what it definitely cannot be referring to. Because if you're going to mavara something, so you're either saying it's definitely what it is, or you're taking a position that it could mean things, and this is what you're saying it is, A and not B. Or you're saying it definitely not that. So Ramchal broke this down in both statements. He just had the word efshar, can be efshar yes and efshar no. But he also had mukhrach and nimna. He just said two types of efshar there, if you remember the book. Okay, now he also makes another call about lashon. It's either benachusa or tamiyah. It's either said in a literal way or in a rhetorical way. What's the difference? Or the third one is a suffix. It can be said as a question. Okay? Or what's my derech sheila? Suffix to him means a question. Okay? So it's either a statement or a rhetorical statement or it's a question. Ume'acher, excuse me, a statement that said literally, in a simple way, Hine hu kamoshu. It means exactly what it says. Chayav o shlili. If it says something is, there's the word chayav shlili, makayim o shlili. If it says something is. If it says it's not. O hengolav, yes or no. It is what it says what it means. Hanema b'tmiya, but if a statement is said in tmiya, im hu chayav chozer lahavcho shu shlili. Im hu shlili chozer the rhetorical question means exactly the opposite of what it says. I say, he's a chacham. You know, it means he's not a chacham. So, lashon tamiyah always means the opposite of what it means. The third type is the suffix. Efshar lios echad mishnei tzadim. That means the statement can have two different possibilities. He calls suffix hu efshari, because every suffix is efshari. It's either A or B. The efshari hu hayachol al shitzdadi b'shaveh. Very, very important. Told the same kiyotzi v'hem alav kiyotzi bo. That statement is mesupak. It's telling you that there's two possibilities. And he says over here that it should be that both the two possibilities are equal. And the big problem over there with kiyotzi v'alav kiyotzi bo, the Rush brings up, is it doesn't seem that there's any possibility that the Torah should be lav kiyotzi bo. This is learned from a mamatzino. So how could a mamatzino be less than what the ab is? But that's the point. Whenever you see lashon mesupak, it's ozer ozer. It should be that it's equal. Omnam haravia, the fourth type of statement, was called derech techina or bakasha. It's a simple question. Zelo yishtamshu bo b'sifrei hachma Torah. This type of question, some of these, is not really used in Sifrei Torah and the wisdom. We don't have to know about their rules. Okay, so what he's saying really here is that questions in the Gemara are always two-sided, even though they seem one-sided. Simple questions are not really asked. There's always there must be two sides.
So even in a she'el, what the Ramchal calls a she'el, what did he call it? In a request for information. Right. So a request for information is really only one-sided. Tell me the information.
Right. But it seems here he doesn't want to say that. He said there must be alternatives. You wouldn't ask Ketzad Maradim with a kala. There was only one way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's okay. It's, again, what we have to focus on the Sefer is always that he's involved in what's not being said, the inference. In other words, what's being said is coming to nishma from something else, you know. So even so, there's always two sides. There's always an issue being debated, and that's the way of chachma. Because simple things, as he's going to say later on, if I say that this ring is silver, and there's no doubt about it, so there's no reason to say the statement. There always has to be a shikul somewhere, or else there's no sense talking about it. Because the Gemara says Peshita, my Kamashbalan. It's a very big yisod in his sefer that everything that we're going to investigate in the Gemara is going to be a shikul adas. It's not going to be something that's obvious. It's one of the basic rules. Okay, now we're going to go through Minhag Rashi and the Ramban. Okay. Again, next week, I guess we'll do the application, but it's a very important application because it brings everything in, it crystallizes things and makes it a usable rule and not just words. Here's a couple of rules he gives about the derech of Rashi. Okay, Minhag Rashi Sal Shitaso. The way Rashi works and his shita. Number one, He shalo dabe davlo hotzi mila b'lashano shalo l'tzarech. Okay, this is general rule of all Meforshim, but he repeats it for Rashi. Rotzu Matz, ki kashe yadabe davar al loshen haGemara hu. When Rashi comments in the Gemara, and here's our four rules. It's really the four rules. The only one he didn't bring up is mini Asafik here, but let's go over them again. Ola forish babo kihu sasam, like the word mava. You have no idea what it means. This is Lashon Zar. Oyos nishma mi persha acher mutar, or he's trying to tell you this is Peshat and not something else that the words seem to say. Okay, like Hashem puts his hand in Tzarayim, or that we said that Leah had that Rachel had kef Leah. Okay, you might think from the simple words it's literal and it's not. O mi akafta o kusha o dochik. Or he's saying what he's saying, because if you don't say what he's saying, then you're going to end up with a kasha. Okay, what's the difference between that kaf and a kusha? But kaf is just stronger, I think. Or dochek, or if you don't say what I'm saying, you end up saying something that's very dochek. Okay, the words seem to be saying that, but you still have to say such a thing. Olatachan, the fourth thing is the takan lashon. So these are the four basic yisodos. He added Miniya Safek. He doesn't bring it up here. I wonder why. He just didn't bring it up. But he said the reason why he comments is these four things. Sasam, Nishmai Perish Acher, to answer a difficulty, he has to talk. Or Natakan Lashon. Commotion, Dampi Lamalik, Hashem Arti Dake Meforshim. As I mentioned above, in the general rules of Dake Meforshim. So if we're going to look at Rashi, I want to say in each Rashi, what is he doing here? Okay? L'gam ken min hago, l'forish ha-mishnah, o mamar ha-gemara, o brisa, betchila ha'inyan kafi ha-maskana shebasof. It's a very important rule that when he says Peshat in the Mishnah, it's according to the maskana. Okay, the Gemara may go through a lot of Havaminis and say, look, the Mishnah simply says this, and it'll reject it and come to a very seemingly dochek explanation. But when Rashi explains the Mishnah, he does it according to the maskana. That's the rule. Okay? Leforish HaMishnah or Mamar Gemara or Brisa, Betchila, the first time he does it according to the Maskana, Shubasov. Ulhaniya Hasfeiches Hagaluim Mashiach Keneged Amar Mahu V'loma HaGemara Parach U'Gemara Meforish. Now, anytime there's a doubt about what something means, Rashi will tell you, the Gemara will explain it later on, or the Gemara will ask this question. Now, what happens if it's in the beginning of the sugya? Okay. Loma la common portion. All of a sudden you see something that's unusual, that, as the Ramchal taught us, you're supposed to define all your terms before you speak about it. So here a term is being used and it's not clear. He says, don't worry about it. I understand you're going to have that problem. The common portion. Further on, they're going to explain it, or the common parach, or this question that you're asking, take of nira. We're going to see the Gemara is doing it. So he does what the Ramchal says, even though the Gemara doesn't spell out that it's going to clarify this issue, but Rashi says, don't worry about it, don't get confused. This question is going to be handled. I don't have to handle it, the Gemara will handle it. Okay. Now, when Rashi says kos al kadaitach, what does it mean? Kasher tiya oso hagdama asher maniach echrochis shisvor also atoke. When he says kos al kadaitach, it means the Gemara is holding at this point a certain premise. It has to be. The person who's making the statement, who's asking the kasha, is holding the following premise at this point. However, this premise is going to be rejected. That's why Rashi says this is a havamina at this moment. It's a flag word to tell you, but this premise is going to be rejected as the Gemara moves on. So anytime this happens where Rashi says kol sal kadaitach and he gives you a premise that's going to be applicable at this moment, you always have to look into it and say, well, why do we need this premise now? What was it in the statement that forced Rashi to say that this premise was the operating principle? Is it possible maybe not to have that premise? And still have the kasha, and check really if the premise does go away in the end. So again, it's a very careful investigation. If Rashi says kol chazal kadaitach, you have to investigate why that particular premise is being used at this point, and also make sure that check whether the premise is rejected later on. Omnam Yom HaKos HaKadah Kashir Lefiha Emes Oso Hanao Dama Shalab Miyased Amav Shakusha. Efshar v'she'er came. He always, the truth is, whenever you quote Sabdaitach, it's always because it's impossible that the person who's asking the kash is going to remain with it. Okay, it's going to be rejected. It's a flag word that this is only a temporary havamina. It's important at this particular time, but it's going to be rejected. About him, the efshar liosken, afal pisha mataretz yitchel, so the yomer she'enan came, the yivat lena lefidato lo yomakol sapitaito shemo zeklo. But if a premise is not going to be rejected, so Rashi will never say kol tzapadaita. So that's a flag. It's a flag word that means that this premise is only a temporary premise that's going to be used here and is going to be rejected. That's a rule in Rashi. Okay. L'kein minhag, Rashi's way. L'farish ha'inyin techila v'achar chose l'taken haloshen u'li'asher l'kafiyah. Rashi's way is always to talk about the subject matter first and then go back and to fix up any language. Okay, we said these are the two basic clauses. Inyan and Lashon, we'll see it be used all over the place. So he likes to first explain the subject matter and then go back and fix the language. Kamo shoma al bekinas kinasi in the pasuk here, and I took the pasuk to make it clear for us. It says, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen Heshives Chamasi Me'al B'nei Yisrael Bi'ano Es Kinasi B'Solcham V'lo Kalisi Es B'nei Yisrael B'Kinasi. So Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen turned my wrath back from B'nai Yisrael, and here's the words that Rashi's going to talk about. B'kin'o eskinasi, okay, with his jealousy for my jealousy. What does that mean? So Rashi says, first, the Talmud explains to us, Rashi always explains the Inyan first. What does it mean? What is this concept, kin'o eskinasi? And then he's going to explain the language. So let's see this Rashi here. I just copied and pasted. He said, "Bikin o eskinasi, binikmo esnikmasi, bikasefo esaketzev shayali liksof." So it means that Pinchas got rid of the anger that I should have had. He was angry for my anger. Okay? He got angry. He took the anger that I had. That's what it means. The anger that I should have had, he took. And that's got rid of the anger that Hashem Kibyochol had. And now Rashi explains that Kol Lashon Kina Hu HaMischara Liknom Nikam Mastavar. A person who's, the Lashon of Kina is a person who wants to take revenge for something. And it's called Empirement, which is anger in French. Okay? So there was an example where or another example, so well, let's see 1 second. But you see, Rashi first always explains subject matter and then fixes up language, explains what the words mean. The first thing is more important is the Indian. Here's an example from the spies when Caleb tries to calm everyone down after the big riot. The spies speak bad about Eretz Israel, and the pasuk says, it says, "V'yahas Caleb es ha'am el Moshe." Okay, so Rashi explains first the Indian you want to say. V'yahas Caleb means hishtias kulam. The word v'yahas, the meaning of the word, the Indian, is that he quieted everybody down. Okay, El Moshe. What does it mean, El Moshe? L'shmo Moshe. He said, look what I'm going to say now about Moshe. And he, okay, explain it up your whole commentary. They all think that he's going to speak bad about Moshe and speaking good about Moshe. At the end, here's the word that we need. Here's Vayahas again. Rashi explained language. That's Lashon Shtika, Vayhasmin Shtika, and he brings a couple of examples of it, okay? So there's his rule. His rule is first Rashi explains the subject matter, what's going on, the inyan, and then later on he goes back and he explains the form of the language. Okay. So the Ramban, I don't know how popular the Ramban is, pretty popular, knows a lot like Chumash, but he's one of the main people of the Dr. Talmud. So he gives us a few rules on how to study the Ramban. ובחידושי רמב"ן ז"ל צריך עתה לעיין בעיון דק היטב. He warns us that the Ramban needs very careful investigating. ולהשתדל להוציא ולצמצם כל לשונו בעניין שלא ישאר בו דבר מיותר. Again, as he said with Rashi, you have to make sure that there's not any word that is extra. Afilu osachad, he says. Even one letter. He called the Rav hen b'mishkal u'b'mispar mida, because all his words are weighed, measured, and counted. So here's some things. Listakel. This is general. Always look at the Divrei Maskil. That's very telling exactly where he's starting from. Well, he's a lashon mehamishna or hagmar misado, and on what exact language his commentary is based on. He says, look at that. See if the Ramban could have started his commentary earlier or later. What forced him to count on these particular words? Why is that so important to him? So by doing this, by seeing where he actually starts, you'll be able to understand what his kavanah is. V'das. Mahu kesher hadivarahu. You have to know what is the relationship. Ketzad miyaches umitkashrin kol davar hadivarahu sofa l'reisha sofa. He has to be. He's very, very orderly in his presentation, as we just learned in the Ramchal. He's a master of order, and therefore you have to understand why he put things first and why he put things second. Umahi kavanas hadibor, umahi hasvar or perish salamid l'kayim. Then you have to extract what's the svar, what is his reasoning. You always have to get from the words, what is his reasoning that he wants to establish? Umaha perish osvar shedochek. And again, what is he nishmar from? What does he want to say? Get down to the the essential statement. But more important, the Dr. Talmud always tells us, not more important, but equally important, is what he's saying is what he's not saying. This is something that the Kertfunos did not elaborate on. Okay, he did speak about diukim, but for the Dr. Talmud, diukim are essential. You always have to say, what is it saying, but you also have to investigate what is it not saying. Here's the parish. That's what he's saying, but what is he trying? There's an unspoken parish that he's trying to avoid saying. So you always have to figure that out. And why did he reject this other parish? The Ramban, many times you'll see, he's fighting Rashi. You have to explain, what did Rashi hold? What did he hold? And why did he push Rashi off? You have to think about things with your mind. Which one of the Purushim is he nishma from? And see, is there someone who actually says that? Is this just Rashi? Okay, now he's going to give us a few words that he uses, keywords. Ukasher tekilas perisho oma perish. When the Ramban says in the beginning of his explanation, physically the word perish, me'eza perish acher u'nishar. It must mean, since he says the words mean this, that someone says the words mean something else. So that's a key word. When he says the word perish, he's keying you in that other people say differently. Vatam, why is that true? Kimatzar perisho. Peshita, kizer perish. Why does he have to say perish? We know he's writing a perish. So when he says Ella, bavadai bolam maya perishacher. So whenever the Rambam says perish, he's saying a clear flag that this is an explanation, and don't say another explanation. You always have to figure out, says Dr. Mar, what the other explanation is. V'gam ken kasher omer vakshinan v'pakinan. If he uses the key words, and we ask the following kasher, or we have the following difficulty, ukiyotze be'elu alashanos, any language like this, yesh l'chaleros ma dochek yesh ba'oso kusha, o oso teret shebo homa v'akshinan. Always look, there must be some, v'akshinan means we ask. So what do you mean we ask? It means other people don't ask. So there must be something weak in the kasha. Whenever he says vakshinan pakinan, we ask, must be that other people don't ask. So it must be that there's certain a dochek in this kasha, or else everybody would be asking you. El bavadai me'ez dochek o kasha sheyesh b'lashon hu lefi pirisho. There must be some dochek or kasha that's forcing him. V'hu nachon u'mikusha v'neged minamdo b'ol v'taken. And he's fighting someone else's parish. Vakshinan, we ask, and we have this problem. He's fighting someone else who doesn't have the problems supposedly should have. Ukeshomer mashma or alma, when the Ramban says mashma or alma, yesh l'chaladas ki also hadiyuk o hemshech eno double mukhrach. Very important rule. When he says the word mashma means it doesn't absolutely mean that. But it's what I believe it does mean. Mashma, we hear from that, or alma. Yesh chaladas ki also hadiyuk. The diyuk is going to make o hemshech eno davar mukhrach she'ef shel lahachuicho. It's not mukhrach that you. It must be. Al kain oma alma o mashma. About who's svara nachon. It happens to be the correct svara, but it doesn't have to be mukhrach in the words of the text. Ukesha omer inami, whenever he says inami, hu mitzad ezed sheyesh rishon. We'll see this in the Gemara too, by the way, and we'll see it in Tosfos. Whenever a person says inami, alternatively, it's because there has to be some weakness in the first explanation. So that's a very important little rule to know. You always have to check out what the weakness is that forced him to say the second teretz. Ukesh omer klal, the farish, when he says the word klal, hu lahotzi shahaya be'efshel lekachas also inyan odava chalki o prati ukatsasi v'lo klal ubo lomet shehu kolel. When he says the word klal, it means that it means all cases, and he wants to eliminate the possibility that it means some cases or a particular case. Okay, so he's trying to tell you this is a categorical rule here and not a particular case. Gam ken ose vaven la'amudim. He also uses vav as breaks in his commentary. Rotze lomar ki dakar loma v'akshinan v'parkinan or uparich. What does that mean? V'hine Halashanos hu rogil omar gasher lefi perisho also kusha o teretz bo b'dohek ula pirish asher hu docher midyashev heidev v'az yishtadel hu liyashivo letakel be'inin shlo yehe kasha etzel pirisho. When it says vakshinan v'pekinan, we like they ask and they have difficulties with it. The reason why he says that is because the parish that he wants to give has a difficulty that he has to, or a teretz that he has to explain. It may be true, but he's giving you a flag when he says Rakshin Vakinan, people ask this kasha, and it's a good kasha, but I have to now go and answer it. Okay? Shlo yeh kasha so kasha. Ulechen makomos ki'ilu yesh lecha lekanes tefilas Hashem b'shleima. V'loma b'shleima lefi ha'perish ha'acher nicha ela. So then when you see this for Vakinan or Vakshinan, it's as if he's saying, look, I understand it works out very good to the alternative parish, and it looks bad for me, but I will now explain why my parish is correct. Now, if he doesn't use the vavs, the hainu kesheomer hainu amrinan or ve'akshinan hu behefech ki hu mityashev lepirisho heitev v'soso leperish. When he says Hainu Damrina, that means we say it and that's the truth. Or Vahainu Dakshinan, we have discussion. When he says the word Vahainu, it means that our parish is very, very good, or our kasha stands very well, and the other people are on the weak side. Ukasher Yavo Vakshinan Operkinan Acher Vahainu, but when Akshinan and Perkinan follows Vahainu, Ukiu Oma Vahainu Dakshinan, Vohu L'Siyua Ula Azedevra. It's as if he said, that's why we ask, means what? He's bringing a proof to his words. So check out these vavs. Kihem klal gadol b'dibrav. That's a big klal in his words. Okay, that was a rather rushed view of the Ramban.
Right. I guess we'll do some Ramban inside also.
We're going to do, we're first going to do Rashi next week, Bezrat Hashem. So I just wanted to get through material. I was just going over it, reading over it. It's nothing here that's
it's not hard to read. It's just in remembering
how to
apply it.
Exactly. So let's go over the Rashi for next week.
Right.
Okay. We'll go through our favorite Mishnah.
Right.
In Bava Kama.
Right.
And we're going to now check what Rashi is doing. Okay. And we maybe help from other people. We may not be able to understand it ourselves. But we also should look at Tosfos, because Tosfos will be many times the opposite opinion that Rashi wants to reject, and vice versa. Rashi will be the opinion that Tosfos wants to reject. So we'll have Bezrat Hashem an application next week, and Bezrat Hashem will make this a workable tool.
Right.
So we have a lot of work to do next week, Bezrat Hashem.
Okay. I'm going to find out what Yanki's schedule is, because I'd like him to join for the live application. Sometimes people have Chanukah Mesibas Matzah Shabbos, so I think I have one. Right. I think I have one also. I just have to find out what time it is and figure out if I'll be done by 10:30. I don't know. So maybe we'll be
okay. So we'll be flexible.
Right.
We'll be flexible. If not, we'll have to move things over.
Like Sunday night or something like that. Different night.
Yeah, because it is what it is. Chanukah, Baruch Hashem, is Chanukah with the family.
Right.
And all that. So keep in touch.
Right. So I'll keep. Okay. Very good.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you very much. Well. Okay. Very good. Goodbye.